How's it going, people? Sam Slabber here, and this is the third episode of RuneScape lore. In the last episode, we covered the Naragi God Wars, and we found out a little bit of history on how Guthix obtained his powers. Now, as you all know, Guthix then moved over to Geilinor, and at this point, Geilinor's life came into being, and the first stage started. So, before we get started, let's talk a little bit more about Guthix, his powers and what he's commonly known for. So, Guthix is known as the God of Balance. He was the most powerful of the young gods, and in fact Guthix was the first god to arrive in Geilinor. The way of Guthix, commonly mentioned by his followers, entails as much as acquiring balance, resulting in equilibrium. His only other goal is peace towards mortals. However, the misconception that Guthix is a god of peace and tranquility isn't entirely false, but is not correct either. Guthix sought to create a world of balance, where mortals could live in peace without the interference of gods. However, just because it doesn't have any interference from gods doesn't necessarily mean the world will be at peace. Evidence of this is the ongoing war between the Void Knights and the Void creatures. When you talk to Guthix during the World Wakes quest, Guthix actually states that he is a pacifist. Also, Guthix does not necessarily agree with the actions taken by those who follow him, as he has actually stated that he does not want to be worshipped. So, as you all know, Guthix, after losing his daughter's life, travelled for many centuries and then arrived within Geilinor. After his many centuries of wandering, Guthix finally discovered this perfect land, along with 3 Elder God artifacts. These artifacts were the Stone of Jazz, the Elder Horn, and the Staff of Armadil. It was in this place that he actually realised what he believed to be his purpose: to create a world free of the influence of gods. During the first stage, he opened the World Gate and the Portal of Life, brought forth peaceful races that did not tend towards good or evil, and also races who had no concept of gods in their entirety, but also created basic life forms that we all know today, such as the fish, the birds, the trees. So Guthix played a major role during the first stage. He shaped Geilinor into what it is today. So let's cover some of the major events that happened. Well, upon Guthix's discovery of the Blank Plain, also known as Geilinor now, Guthix began to shape Geilinor and create some wildlife forms. Basically, Geilinor was a near lifeless planet. There was no actual life to speak of other than plants. So Guthix decided to bring some basic creatures into being and kind of bring the world to life. Soon after, Seren arrives within Geilinor. In fact, this happens just after he opens the World Gate. Now, the World Gate opened up a large rift to different planes, which Guthix then brought forth the elves and the Kethsi. These 2 races were the races to come through the World Gate created by Guthix. It's believed that this World Gate originates in Isaftar, the land of the elves, and due to its consistent link to Seren's ancestral home for nearly 2 ages, is likely to actually remain within Isaftar. One theory of its exact location is that the gate is in the Undercity of Pravithnas, which was also sealed when Seren left Geilinor during the Second Age. This is supported by the logic that the elves would build the crystalline capital near the access point to the World Gate and the crystal. So let's talk about these races that came through the World Gate. Well, 2 races came through this gate in particular. Those were the elves and the Kethsi. Now, the thing is, it wasn't just the elves that came through with the elven kind. In fact, a god came through. This god is known as Seren. Seren arrived in Geilinor in the first age, being the only known god besides Guthix to arrive during this time. This information is also confirmed in the quest Meeting History, that Guthix actually welcomed Seren and the elves when they arrived in Geilinor through the world portal. Seren, after leading the elves through the world gate from her native realm into Geilinor's forest of Isaftar, created the legendary Tower of Voices from crystal. It was in this place that the elves would construct Privithnus, one of Geilinor's very first cities, and probably the oldest settlement still in existence today. She was worshipped by them for millennia, and the worship continued even as the chaotic god wars began. Elves went into hiding in Tyrannon when the wars commenced, and when Guthix declared that some gods were to be banished by the edicts of Guthix, Seren sealed Privithnus's undercity, including the Grand Library, with 9 powerful seals. It was thought and believed that after the God Wars, Seren was also affected by the Edict of Guthix, and banished from the land. But it was later confirmed in the quest The World Wakes, and through the god emissaries, that she was bound by the Edict, but never actually left Geilinor. She instead chose to stay, upon which, exploding into a shower of light and crystal, scattering herself throughout the forest. Guthix at this time, thinking she left, wept, and also went back to his slumber. It's said that she inspired the elves to build Privithnus in a way so that she could communicate with them, protect the elves, and for the elves to protect themselves and prosper. She's also the original provider of the crystal bow and the crystal shield, and due to them bearing her powers, they are by far more powerful than many weapons of other races during this time and even to date. More information is provided on Seren and the history of Privithnus in one of the books you can find in one of the bookshelves in Thletia. She is apparently believed to be present within every single elf crystal, which is why the elves can tune these crystals into the bow, the shield, and give them the ability to teleport between the Temple of Light and Thletia. It's also believed that Seren is responsible for creating the direwolves. Although these direwolves are found in the Zamorakian Chaos Tunnels, during the God Wars, creatures of nature such as the Grenwolves also fought for Seren's side. There is one known altar to Seren found in the elven outpost of Thletia. It resembles the altar of Saradomin except that it is made from wood and has no symbol in place where there actually should be one. Additionally, you can actually find Seren's symbol on an altar within Daemonheim itself, along with some very small random inscriptions. So moving on, we now have the Kethsi that also came through at this time. Although the Kethsi were wiped out very early on, they do have a story of their own which I'll cover now. The Kethsi was a massive, large, advanced civilization of an unknown age. The Kethsi were mainly inhabited by a mage conclave. Late in the summer year of the Bubutang, the Stone of Jazz was brought to Kethsi by the elder mage Etheron after a 6-year expedition through the world portal. The inhabitants of the plain relocated the stone to the mage conclave on Mount Firewake. The act of bringing the Stone of Jazz to the Kethian plain, though, through the World Gate, brought great prosperity to all Kethians. The inhabitants were able to tap into the power of the stone in order to work various spells, which vastly improved the living conditions of Kethians, and even helped to repel many enemies. However, due to the prolonged use of the Stone of Jazz, this provoked the curse to activate, and the Dragonkin came to invade the Kethsi. As you know, the Dragonkin, a humanoid dragon race, were cursed by Jazz, an elder god, to protect the Stone of Jazz from misuse. And because of this, the Kethsi now had a war in their hands. The Conclave gathered their 52 Grand High Mages to fight against the Dragonkin, but even their most powerful spell backfired, and only succeeded in further enraging the Dragonkin. Their continued attempts to combat the Dragonkin were made, although to no avail. It soon became evident that trying to fend off the Dragonkin with the Stone of Jazz had absolutely no effect, as the stone's power was directly linked to the Dragonkin themselves. Renowned philosophers of the Kethsi remarked that the Dragonkin only appeared after the Stone of Jazz was brought to Kethsi. They further speculated that the Dragonkin may therefore be some sort of guardians to the stone, used to prevent unworthy beings from accessing its power. The efforts of the Kethians were futile, and soon the headquarters of the Conclave were destroyed. However, a small remainder of Kethians actually survived and then retreated towards the Isle of San in hopes of escaping the Dragonkin. In a last-ditch effort to stop the Dragonkin, they attempted to create brand new weapons from Bane ore. Weapons made from this Bane ore were magically tuned to be harmful to specific creatures. Smelting the ore, and then using the bars on the tempered anvil located on the Isle of San, created Bane bolts and Bane arrows. These weapons were actually proven to be able to take down Dragonkin. However, the supplies needed to mass produce such weapons were not available. It was then assumed that the Dragonkin were eventually able to destroy the Kethsi in their entirety, resulting in its present condition. The events leading up to the attack on the Kethsi and the attack themselves is actually chronicled by Dathana in a message left behind on the Isle of San. So, while the World Gate was created, the elves, Seren, and the Kethians came through. Soon after this, Pravithinus was actually created, and Seren and her elven kind flourished, and started creating civilizations throughout the entirety of the western side of Geilinor. Though, soon after, the Portal of Life was created, and through this Portal of Life, the humans came through. The Portal of Life was a triumphant creation by Guthix. It is said to have been sealed during the Second Age though. When Guthix shaped the world, it is believed he also created a gateway through which the many worlds or universes could commune, through specifically designed to link to Geilinor's realm with another dimensional plane, that of the humans. Its only known users are the humans who arrived in Geilinor during the First Age. The gate is thought to have been sealed soon after their arrival though, but whether Guthix or some other deity did this is actually unknown. Since then, none have been able to access Geilinor directly through the portal. Instead, beings from other worlds have found alternative methods of entering, usually through very unstable portals, the fairy rings, or other means of teleportation. Whether or not the Portal of Life will ever be opened again is actually unknown. If it were to be opened, this would open up countless possibilities for Geilinor. The potential dangers of connecting Geilinor to other worlds may have caused the gate to be sealed. According to the Coordinator, the Fairy Queen harnessed the magic of a powerful portal that had been sealed for centuries to create the fairy rings. Though whether or not this portal is actually the Portal of Life, we don't know. So during this time, the humans then came to Geilinor. So Geilinor was largely inhabited by elves and humans during this time. But while Guthix was creating life throughout the entirety of the First Age, there was other races that came to being. These races were the gnomes, the dwarves, fairies, and fairy dragons. I'll get into the different races at another time, but for now, during this time then, after all these races had been created during this First Age, Guthix then uses the massive power of the Stone of Jazz. While channeling the power of the stone, he ended up creating magic itself throughout the entirety of Geilinor. In fact, even placing runestones in random locations throughout the land, which allows sentient races to practice the mystic arts. During this time, throughout the events, from the very start of when Guthix set foot upon this land, until soon after creating magic through the Stone of Jazz, Guthix then descends deep underground, beginning his slumber, which is said to last nearly 6,000 years. The entirety of the First Age, from the very first time Guthix entered this land until he sleeps, 4,000 years had passed, and now Guthix goes into his slumber. However, the Second Age is now here, and as you all know, the Second Age is where other gods infiltrate Geilinor while Guthix slumbers. But that is another story for another time. Well, I hope you all enjoyed. That was the coverage of the First Age of Geilinor. That's pretty much every single thing that happened during the First Age. And next up will likely be the Second Age, although this one is quite massive, gotta be honest. So yeah, I hope you all enjoyed, and I will catch you all later. Have a good one.